Happy Saturday, SMITE fans. You are watching Week 2, Day 2 of the SPL Season 8, powered, of course, by our friends at Alienware. Make sure to check them out on all social media at Alienware. Join the growing global gaming community that they are putting on. Awesome. Thanks so much to our friends at Alienware for sponsoring us this year. Goremizer is with me, though, all day today. Gore, we're on the desk to start off. We are casting a little bit later on. We've got some great matches here. In the name of the game, Gore, as we look at the schedule, is bounce back time, right? The Oni Warriors and the Tartarus Titans, teams that are playing in both of our matches today. Time for them to bounce back.
And desperately at that. They both got 0-2'd yesterday, so they really need a win under their belt. But not only are they 0-2 from yesterday, I believe both of them are 0-2 in the standings themselves. And yeah, that would be right. Sitting down there at the bottom, this is a desperation call for them. I will be honest, Dave, if I'm looking at the schedule for today and I'm looking at the standings, I have a little more hope, I think, for the Warriors' capabilities in this one than I have for the Titans and taking down the Dragons later.
Right, not trying to be harsh. I mean, bounce back is a bit of a misnomer. You have to bounce back to something that the Warriors and the Titans haven't quite got to yet, so it's time to bounce forward, I guess.
So it's just a bounce?
Just a bounce. It's time to bounce upward.
You gotta jump.
You gotta take the leap here if you're one of these two teams. And I agree, Gordon, as we jump into the discussion for our first matchup here, Oni Warriors versus the Solar Scarabs. What's been kind of the thought here around this Oni Warriors team? That they came in, all the preseason videos we did, we sat down, casters' thoughts, myself included, we were thinking top 3 team. They still could be based on roster alone, but they have not played like that to start off the year.
Yeah, on paper, this is a draft and a team that theoretically should just run through everybody, right? I mean, you get the 2 parts of a 2 times, well, technically Cuvo's a 1-time world champion, but Neil, 2-time world championship player, and you add it to what was one of the most devastating teams of last season, it seems like it should be a good mix, but something doesn't seem to click here. And, you know, again, I feel like it has to be under there just because for this phase, this is going to be the topic of conversation, but the ping that has to be taken into the equation for people like Neil, who's playing from very far away in Canada, and things like that, especially I think he's off on the West Coast. So there's a lot of interesting things that can affect it in those regards, but I mean, you got to look at it like, look, we're 2 weeks in. They've had 2 sets to be played, and still the best highlights we can play for these players is from, like, Worlds and things like that. Cuvo is one of those players. We saw his high end at Worlds, and man, if we got that Cuvo every week in, week out, he would be one of the best junglers in the SPL, hands down, top to bottom. But the problem is that doesn't always come through. Sometimes we still get to see that Cuvo, but sometimes it's not quite the case. And so that's what I'm wondering is what hot, cold, where are we going to be with Cuvo? He is a very capable jungler. I love watching him play. And I will admit they haven't necessarily had an easy schedule up to this point. Yesterday, the Valkyries, though, that was a team that people were expecting to be a little easier to take on as opposed to the Dragons that they had to face last week. So technically, you've gone down to 2 teams. The Scarabs is maybe the next on that list, along with the Valkyries and maybe the Bolts, as a team that I would say, if you are going to fight into the league, if you're going to be looking for your wings, or your wins, I should say here, this is where you should be able to find one as a team against the Scarabs. They're the only team that had to play 5 last week. They beat the Valkyries, though, and since the Warriors weren't able to do that yesterday, I guess transitive property says that the Warriors theoretically shouldn't be able to beat the Scarabs.
Right, all the math paying off. When you tell your teacher, when am I ever going to use this transitive property, I guess applies here. It's a good start, admittedly, for the Scarabs. You go up against the Olympus Bolts, literally game number 1 here, you lose 2-0. Then you bounce back against what's shaping up to be a pretty good-looking Valkyries team. The jungle matchup, Gore, I think is going to be ever so important here because you look at what happened to Cuvo Fred yesterday in the matchup against the Valkyries. Johnny, played in the SPL years ago, SEC for a little while, came back in. I don't think I'm overextending in saying Cuvo Fred got out-jungled by Johnny yesterday. A very...
Yeah.
I'll call him maybe a similar style player here in Layers. Loves the aggressive, get-in-your-face style of play. If he gets those types of picks, the Tsukuyomi definitely caters to that type of play style. So this is going to be an important one, not only for Cuvo Fred, but for Layers.
Yeah, Johnny yesterday, his capabilities in rotations really just screwed with the Warriors and made it so difficult for them to figure things out. Layers was number 2 in kills. Granted, he had 5 games to do it, but he was number 2 in kills after week 1 of the SBL. So you know he's being proactive. He was, I said this last week, I'll say it again, one of the most talked about players every time we watched any of the games he was in either SOC, SCC, wherever he happened to be at the time. Everyone would mention him and talk about, why isn't this guy in the SBL yet? Where is he? Why don't we see him up at that level? Well, now you get to see him up at that level, and with this team around him again, some that he's had synergy with in the past, you get to play with Zapman on this team as well. Like, a lot, I think, that can go right and well for this team. I think a lot of it, like you said, for this matchup is very strictly in this jungle. Cuvo, depending on how he shows up, and Layers, depending on how he looks.
Layers going into this game, game number 1, 20 kills, 9 deaths, 29 assists. Looks good for the young jungler there for the Solar Scarabs. I was able to sit down with Layers prior to this big matchup. Here's some of his thoughts going up against a strong opponent in the Warriors. Take a listen. All right, everybody, I am down here with Layers, the jungler, of course, for the Solar Scarabs. They're going up against the Oni Warriors today, so we'll pick his brain here a little bit. First of all, Layers, coming off a 2-1 win over the Valkyries. Congratulations, first off, to you, Baronic, and the rest of the team, but mainly you and Baronic for your first SPL wins. What does that mean to you and kind of the team in general to grab that first win?
Is obviously we break like the win barrier, so it feels really good.
Yep.
Getting that first win kind of like makes us feel better, right? Because it makes us feel like not as like stressed to get our first win.
Right.
We get that off like we cross it off the bucket list, so like that's just like a massive step for us, right?
Absolutely.
And
Look,
we just have to keep building off it. Yeah, just you have to build off it. That's all.
Well, to follow up on that, what is the focus now for this team? I mean, from the Bolt set onto the Valkyrie set, we saw big steps, big improvements enough that you guys got the win. What's the focus now to take that next step and improve even further?
The focus is just growth from set to set, right? Because the beginning of the year, I mean, it's important still, but it's not as important as like the later ends of the year, like Worlds and stuff. Worlds is like the big tournament, and you want to make sure that you're informed for it. So each set, we just want to be growing, right? That's like the whole point. Is just to get better at each set.
Yeah, a lot of SMITE to be played, a lot of little growth to be done that eventually results in something great there by the end. Kind of final thoughts here. Mentioned you're going up against the Warriors. Cuvo Fred specifically will be your opponent there out of the jungle. What's the team focus going into this matchup? What's your focus? What are your thoughts going up against Cuvo Fred? Or are you guys just kind of playing your own style and not worrying so much about the opponent specifically?
We're just going to stick to our guns, just make sure we play our SMITE. Obviously, playing against Cuvo is like, it's not really a dream, but I guess you can call it a dream because I've been watching him for like ever, right? The guy's been playing since the beginning of time for SMITE, and he's just a long-time player and he's a good player. So just gonna make sure that we come in correct and make sure we play right.
Chance to play against him, a chance to beat him in this matchup. Layers, thanks so much for sitting down with me, and best of luck.
Thank you.
Layers absolutely motivated, and a chance to take down a guy that he spent a lot of time watching and admiring, and now Layers is here at the SPL level, putting on a great show through the first couple of games. Picks and bans for game number 1 will tell us the story that is going to unfold before our eyes. Gormizer, we haven't seen all that much shifting from week number 1 in the SPL. It's been pretty standard as far as priority goes in this ban phase. We've seen Tiamat roll through a couple of times. It's mainly, for whatever reason, it's the Valkyrie sets where the Tiamat gets in. The Valkyries played it once, didn't work. And then yesterday played against them a couple of times, didn't work then either. So I wonder, where is Tiamat in the conversation nowadays? It's been beaten 3 times. We thought it was this end-all, be-all. You get it, you win. You go against it, you lose. But it's been anything but.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see. The Scarabs watched yesterday's games, which at this point I can't imagine why you wouldn't have. You're going to maybe recognize that, hey, the Warriors lost with Tiamat twice. That's not necessarily a must-ban, whereas it seems like the Warriors did their homework, saw Baronic's Yanis. And that's the thing I'm wondering, if you can get away with not banning Tiamat, and you know that the Warriors aren't necessarily going to win a game off of it, can you, as the Scarabs, in second pick, somehow get the number 1 god that is on the list right now? that's probably a no-go, but if you do, then of course the question becomes, how good's Baronic going to look on this pick? Yesterday, a lot of the bans for the Warriors were Sobek, Set, Athena. They traded out one of those for the Loki and the Yanis, or two of those, I should say, Loki, Yanis, in the second game. So these two are not necessarily outside of the wheelhouse of the bans that they've been focusing on, if it's pretty much in standard with where they've been playing. And both are really good. I mean, Inbound last week looked really, really good on this Sobek. I like the bans from the Warriors. I like what's coming out of the Scarabs too, although theirs is more damage control than it is necessarily targets.
Agreed. This is going to be an important matchup too, Nika versus Solo or Troll. Glad to be able to get a little bit of a highlight on those two. The Guan Yu taken away. So Sun Wukong, I think then comes to mind where we've seen high damage numbers, high output, high backline dive from that Sun Wukong pick. So I think that starts to rise to a premium if it's left available, and it is. So something to keep on mind as we move into the first round of picks we have here. Loki taken away, Yamoja off the board as well. Sobek, another Guardian that's seen plenty of play, but also plenty of bans. So now the Oni Warriors in this first spot where we have to bring up the Tiamat again. Are we at a point now where she's the best? I don't know. And I think there are more important picks to take in front of her at the moment. Athena has just not been allowed to be played. 94% ban rate, 6% pick rate, which is good for one singular game. And Athena has won the only game that we've seen her in here in the SPL. And the Oni Warriors are going to grab her first and foremost. And we're so used to seeing her banned, you almost forget that she's around when she is. And the Oni Warriors are going to take her as their first pick.
Let's put it in a fun perspective, right? You had mentioned she's played one game, won one game, and has a 94% ban rate. At this point, Athena has been let through less than Tiamat, and that should really reveal to you why her priority is so high. I think that this is a god that absolutely, in the right hands, can change things. Plus, she's very flexible, right? I don't know where the Warriors are going to put her, but I will say this year we have seen her flex a lot solo, a little bit into support and to jungle as well. So having technically 3 roles that you can throw her into is going to be really good for you. Alongside Jing Wei, this isn't going to be necessarily, if this is the duo lane, not necessarily a very dominant duo lane where it's going to just take over from the get-go, but a really deadly team fight when you get into those 15 minutes, 20-minute groupings.
Right, solo, jungle, support, who knows. Tsukiyomi, I will say, still add some intrigue into this pick. Tsukiyomi, we've seen solo lane and jungle as well. Probably not Tsukiyomi support, but Athena could be one of the 3. Tsukiyomi could be one of the 2. A later on pick will probably open our eyes a little bit more. One final pick here for the Solar Scarabs, who've started off, Gore, with, I think, as far as the SPL tier list goes, maybe one of the most powerful duo lanes and maybe the most powerful solo laner still left available. I say maybe because obviously there are plenty of contested picks in that regard, especially if Athena is in that conversation. But the top 3 from the Solar Scarabs here have been some of the most important picks over the first couple of weeks.
Look, on her Ymir, first off, it's the 2012 kill lane. Like, if you've been playing Smite for a long time, this is the lane that works together to kill you best. I think the only thing that rivals it is probably on her Sobek, right? We've seen that a lot recently. But I mentioned this, we actually got to see this in the SCC this morning. Ymir's wall is just a giant stun zone if you're able to get them between, I guess, the on her and the wall. So really good lockdown here for the Scarabs. With the way Inbound played this Ymir last year as well, especially as the time went on, I really expect this to be a solid lane. I'm wondering, I think maybe actually, like, as weird as it says to say this, pressure on Zap to perform. I know he's going to be perfect, but I think this is where the on her comes in. I expect Bobby's going to have solid setup, but if the follow-up isn't there, it's not going to necessarily matter. But this could be the deadliest duo lane that the Warriors have had to deal with so far just because of the picks.
Could be. Athena Jing Wei, if that ends up being the duo lane, definitely nothing to scoff at either. So I talk about how on her Ymir, Sun Wukong have been top priority. Athena, a little bit here and there on Jing Wei, but Tsukiyomi there as well. Nothing to scoff at for the Oni Warriors. Their top 3 fantastic as well. Baronic eats a couple of bans here. Scylla in the second wave, and then, of course, the Giannis first and foremost overall there from the Oni Warriors. Where does he go? Down to the Chang'e Goremizer. So that opens up an interesting playstyle here, where if you get a massive Chang'e ultimate, suddenly these team fights can just get run over with kind of low effort from everyone else.
And that can compound very easily
It's a big if.
off of Ymir, right? So, like, there is some team fight capabilities for him. It could also work pretty well, like, not quite as synergistic with, like, an Ox form knockup, depending on how many people Wukong gets in that. But the thing I will say is that Chang'e, specifically Baronic's Chang'e, is one of the few that we got to see in North America last year. Around the same time Zeros was picking it up and the European SEC was picking it up, then it's kind of eked its way. We started to see it in the Pro League as well. That was about the time we saw, at least in NA, Baronic start picking it up, and I think this is a really good pick for him. I'm actually really excited to see what it can do.
Susano hover and Susano locked in. Ban rate 18%. Who was Susano gotten banned against? I can't believe that, but it's the first. Must have been yeah, you're right. Panatom probably who grabs one of those bans against him, but a Susano for layers here. So the Solar Scarabs much clearer in where these picks are going to end up landing. Very good, very standard draft from these guys, and that's a good thing, I think, in this case for the Solar Scarabs team. You get great picks in a relatively standard draft. That's going to bode you well. On the other side, Oni Warriors score still some flexibility. Tsukiyomi, Athena, and then the Nemesis there, so it's probably Nem Jungle, Tsukiyomi solo, and then Athena down there in the support role. What do you think, though, the game plan is for this Oni Warriors team?
Honestly, at this point, especially with the Nemesis lock-in, that's going to help burn Wukong and Ymir, Susano, or like Chang'e, I should say, potentially going a little tanky. Like, Chang'e kind of came from that meta where we're used to seeing, a survival item, typically fourth, locked in for that mid laner. So we'll have to see if she goes like Spear of Deso, Rod of Tahuti, protect me, or if she goes more damage right there. That's typically, that fourth item has been a lot of percent pin items being picked up for these mid laners. So Nemesis is going to have a lot of prowess in that, but also a lot of chase down. I'm looking at least in terms of on her, he's going to have easy getaway, Susano easy getaway, but Nemesis can slow them down. Tsukiyomi has range. It's going to be interesting to see, mainly because if I was going to give one of these junglers Susano, I would have leaned towards it being Cuvo Fred more than I would have thought Layers pulling it out. Like, Layers, I'm still, like, trying to reacquaint myself with his God pool, right? We got to see it a lot in the SCC, but those don't stick with me as fresh as a lot of those SBL picks do. So we're getting to see a nice wide variety from Layers, which I'm personally loving already, but this is going to be the interesting one. Nemesis is not necessarily the god that I think of in terms of the matchup that we've been talking about all day, keeping up in the jungle. I think Susano's going to be able to get those carries kind of on his side and in his favor. We'll see if the Nemesis can keep up.
Oni Warriors, Solar Scarabs, game number 1, Finch and Mifflin on the call.
Thank you, Dolson and Gormizer. Into the SBL we go. Indeed, Finch and Mifflin here for what should be a very close set, just based on how this phase has started so far. And Miff, just looking at the Oni Warriors draft, I mean, Tsukiyomi, Morrigan, Athena. I mean, sometimes you wonder what got banned, but there's just so much good stuff right now that picks like that are just going to make it through. But early thoughts on these two drafts, which way you lean in and what do you like?
I really do like the Oni Warriors draft in general because of the same sentiment that you bring up. What got banned, right? How did they come away with all of this, and the Scarabs kind of don't come away with too much of that primary meta stuff, but I think that the Scarabs may have come away with a pretty sneaky good draft here. The initiation makes perfect sense to me. Have inbound work his way forward, find a wall onto many of these immobile warrior gods on the side of the Oni Warriors, burn away the beads, and then set up for Baronic to find that multi-man ultimate himself. But if I have to favor just one, it's got to be the squad that has Athena on it.
And she is so strong right now. Certainly worth noting that Wukong and on her, maybe even like a little bit of Mir, but I think less this like lately. I think on her and Wukong are priority picks, so they got something, but just can't match up to this Athena value. And take a look at what Bobby Inbound has here, that Sentinel's Gift. I think that's really fallen by the wayside lately here, Miff. We've just seen Benevolence into Compassion as kind of the autopilot way to go in that support role. Is there room, you think, where maybe you go the Sentinel's Gift and kind of forego some of that extra farm for your ADC that you normally would be getting with Benevolence?
Right here.
We don't see it too often, but I associate Sentinel's Gift with a much more aggressive style. I want Bobby to really utilize the sustain that it affords him. You want to be using your mana constantly, taking damage and dealing damage, and just using that additional sustain, not only from Sentinel's Gift, but also that Chalice of the health pot. Could be able to just bully out his lane opposition, but he does take an early rotation over towards mid, sacrificing a little bit of his own farm, but Zapman should benefit from that, pull slightly ahead.
Right, it's essentially still giving Zetman some benevolence in a way, right, by letting him get some farm on his own, and then Inbound can still kind of enjoy the extra sort of selfishness of Sentinel's gift that gives him that ability to sort of get a little bit more self-sustained. So let's see now, a little bit of action over these Oracles. That is foregone. Everyone's got to come back to these waves. You got to be quick right about now in terms of what you can rotate out of lane to do because the farm's so critical. But I think these relics tell an interesting story as well. It's Blink for this Chang'an. That has just become a package deal, hasn't it? Blink Waxing Moon is such a strong engaged tool, and you kind of force the Chang'an pilot to rely entirely on that second ability, that dance, to get them out of trouble. So you got to make sure you're being really, really careful with that cooldown.
But it is such a potent tool in itself, isn't it? Blink forward. If you're using Blink to reposition, you're almost always at least guaranteeing 2 people get hit by the ultimate, a 2-second stun. A lot can happen in that amount of time, especially considering the burst potential that the rest of the Scarabs bring. Layers of his ultimate, even Zapman, once he's able to rotate out and act in the 5v5, Desert Fury going to be a very good follow-up there. So I think it makes sense, but it does still open up Chang'e for that early aggression from the Warriors. Maybe afforded that Blink because of Cubo Fred going towards this Nemesis. A little bit less pressure coming from the jungler, and an unorthodox mage inside of the Morgan means that the Baronic really doesn't have to worry too much until that level 10, 11, 12 point.
But then there might be some trouble. How does he deal with Slice and Dice? How does he deal with the Changeling in this game as well? I've got to think that Dardes has already decided on his optimal strategy. I wouldn't hate maybe even some Nemesis transformations, maybe some Tsukuyomis here. What in your mind feels like kind of the optimal transformation for Dardes, or does he have a couple that he can go to kind of swirling around for him right now?
The standouts to me, you're probably going to be turning into Tsukiyomi. Maybe you see the Susanoo if you got to close gap a little bit, but there's also the ability to turn into Neilma, turn into that Athena, and just act as another global ultimate for your team. Sure, a little bit less strong on landing than potentially what a Typhoon could do, but still just that X factor of saying, all right, well, we're always going to outnumber you, even if Neil's ultimate's down. I mean, Dardes should be able to make up for it.
It's a good point. Sort of gives him an auxiliary backup defender of Olympus if needed. And listen, Dardes about one of the Morgan pilots, better Morgan pilots you could ask for out there anywhere in terms of how well he uses those transformations, how well he uses that base mage form as well. A lot of times I think Zero's name comes up for me with Morgan. He played it so often. It was so iconic in his hands, and he really sort of, I don't know if revolutionized is quite the right word, but was one of those ones that was really like, listen, you got to make sure you're using her almost like an assassin until you transform, and then an additional value comes out, and Dardes certainly does a lot of that too, so I think the sky's the limit for what we might see from him. And I was having this discussion yesterday about Nemesis to switch to these junglers. Is it always auto attack with her anymore? She had a little bit of time where there was a sort of an ability focus build for her with big slice and dice damage. Is that just in the way, in the mirror, no longer looking at that anymore? It's entirely auto attack for her, as Cubo Fred does elude trouble.
Auto attack's certainly much better, especially considering how automation changed in Season 8. You don't really want to go down that mace tree too often unless it's for the Brawler's Beat Stick or occasionally a Titan's Bane. So Jotun's Wrath really not as easy to build in as it used to be in Season 7. So I think auto attack certainly going to be the way to find penetration, as Dardes shows he's turning it on her and already inbound getting turned on.
And that's huge. Turns it into first blood for the Oni Warriors, and they might get second blood too, but Waxing Moon, so versatile. Baronic does a good job finding the turnaround there, but even better for Dardes. What looked like certain death with that wall into freeze combo turned into kill opportunity. Cubo Fred rotates in, and Neilma there, and that sets up first blood.
That's just the damage output that Desert Fury brings throughout the early. I didn't even get a chance to talk about the Zapman transformation. It's like, what was that, like 300-400 damage in the early game, just immediately in inbound. Doesn't even need to find the CC, just immediately works his way forward there. Clean play from the Oni Warriors, but it does cost them a lot of their utility. Cubo Fred and Neilma both drop their ultimate there as well, so the Scarabs might have a small opportunity now to try and force another fight before those cooldowns are available again.
Dardes clearly showing that he's ready and comfortable on this Morgan, though he is now without Changeling and without his Purification Beads. Wouldn't be surprised if we see him play things a little bit slower, at least for the next maybe minute and a half or so, till Beads are back online. Changeling probably come online a little bit before that. But great work from Alray to start this early game off well for them, and this has become a really close matchup. I think maybe not a bit fair to the Scarabs, but coming into the season, Warriors would have been thought of as a stronger team than the Scarabs, just kind of based on what we've seen PK and SSG, kind of the old teams that formed this roster, do. But now, because of some of these struggles, this has turned into a big matchup. As Neoma looking for Zapman. Good beats from him, though. Very used to ganks to his lane. Gets out of there. But I think this is a big match for both of these teams, but they both really need a win here.
Zapman does maintain his beats, loses out the ultimate, but yeah, Solar Scarabs take a win here. 2-1 is going to be their win-loss for the year so far, which I think is pretty impressive, especially considering the expectations coming into it for them. But already, Neil Ma trying to keep that pressure up on top of that duo lane. Zapman maintaining his passive throughout the years, cannot escape just being outnumbered inside of the long lane as Veronic caught out.
Let's see if the dance will be enough to get him out of here. Dardes turns the on her again, and Vote is the one that gets the kill credit. Now it's Inbound, the next one in trouble, and still value coming from this on her, so that is a big two-man freeze. Defender of Olympus connects, and Shard Device, I think, signifies an acceptance of death from Inbound. Do some damage on the way out, but that will not change the fact that that turned into a 2-for-0 Myth. Dardes is all in on these on-her transformations in the early game to turn Morrigan into an aggressor. Were you expecting this? As Solar Troll has a chance for a solo kill. Nika gonna use that ultimate to try and reposition, but nothing there as SOT finds the first kill for Scarabs.
Phenomenal play from SOT to find that pick, and knowing that the entirety of the enemy team is on the opposite side of the map, knows he can get back to base pretty easily. A calculated decision from the Sun Wukong. But no, I was not expecting the on-her transformation this consistently. I had maybe thought we'd see it occasionally, but you gotta imagine Susano's still out there with Anchile already built up. That's a phenomenal CC tool and AoE damage. But Dardes certainly making his on-her find its value here. Zapman kind of wishing that he could do the same thing, I think, but hasn't had the exact same opportunities that Dardes has. Keep your eyes on him in the future, though. I think we're starting to hit that point inside of these junglers' builds where Dardes can start shifting up his transformations, especially around the Tsukiyomi, especially around the Susano.
Looks like Scorpion in the eyes of the Scarabs here. That will be taken down, and buffs then enhanced, but the Fire Giant Scorpion being looked at in return. Only Warriors now on it, forcing Solo or Troll in layers to retreat. So left side of the map, Scorpion goes to the Warriors, Fire Giant Scorpion goes, or rather the other way around, Fire Giant goes to the Warriors, and Scarabs take the Gold Fury one. But that means now the Gold Fury itself is a big objective here on the map. But the way the Warriors are playing this, I'd not be surprised if they try and force something over there. As Dardes has found layers in the jungle, but is forced to retreat. The Typhoon too strong, but he turned into the on-her and stands tall in it, though Inbound comes in to collect the kill. That the groundwork was laid by layers. So in comes Neoma trying to sort things out for his team, but Cuvo Fred still has Blink over the wall and can look for Baronic, and Nika gets here a little sooner than the opposition. That means he can set up for Cuvo Fred to put down Baronic to 2-for-1 in favor, this time, of the Warriors.
Nice rotation from Nika, changes that fight. If he doesn't show up, I think the Scarabs come away pretty cleanly there. Could even potentially keep the fight up themselves. Inbound in a little bit of trouble, throws out the freeze, doesn't connect. Neoma thinks better of it and retreats back. Catches Zapman in the jungle here, Vote on the chase.
And Zapman rotating over to mid early, but the wall from Inbound should set up an opportunity, though Neoma does retreat and uses the blink to escape back to safety. Looks like an early Magi is coming from him as Vote has his beads forced out in the trouble. Zapman does find a good impale, but doesn't matter when Vote's channeling the ultimate. Neoma escapes. Looks like red buff does get secured by the Oni Warriors, and that means Layers and the Scarabs will try and move over towards purple instead. Dardes cloaked in shadow, but Inbound is here to look for a freeze. He finds it, and Dardes now caught out, makes life way harder, but Inbound gets left behind. Layers abandoned ship, and Inbound gets killed.
Yeah, Inbound throws out 2 auto attacks, like surely Dardes is gonna die here. If I get a third one, I'll do it all on my own. Layers, though, does not catch the memo, immediately disengages, leaves his boy high and dry, and that's a tough situation for the Solar Scarabs. Oni Warriors now 6-2 in the slash lines, but take a peek at the Goldfinch. They haven't been able to transition into anything meaningful just yet. Only about 500 or so gold between these two teams, more so on the experience charts, but even that much experience, 1,200 in favor of the Warriors. You'd expect it to be a little bit more at this point. Both neutral objectives have spawned, so the next team fight could be indicative of how this match could go if one squad could move in towards the Gold Fury.
Well, it looks like for the most part, the end result of all that is that Cuvo Fred has a pretty good lead over Layers. Maybe about a level and a half, looks like 2 here. But we'll see if Layer's able to hit that level 11 mark relatively quickly. The mid 3v3, though, despite the gold differential overall, hasn't really been up for debate, has it? It's been all Neil, Dardes, and Cubo as Neil dashes in again, trying to bait Baronic into giving up that CC immune dance of his. Does not quite get it, so Neil Maw backs off. But how do you feel about the early Magai's cloak here from Neil Maw? We almost never see this.
It makes sense to me into the Solar Scarabs draft. He knows that he's been playing aggressive. He's been kind of acting as a solo agent, so he doesn't want to get frozen out. As Dardes does get caught out, transforms to the on her, and jumps away.
Man, this has been his go-to transformation, but locked off by the wall from inbound. A great one, so Dardes has to try and turn and burn, but it's not there. Inbound showing up on the Amir so far. I think he's actually played pretty well. It just hasn't quite worked out for him in the KDA line, but he's looked good.
Yeah, 2 and 3, nothing to sneeze at this point. Inbound also on top of this red buff timer, finds an opportunity to move forward, but the Athena dunk is there. Nice wall to separate the fight.
Yeah, he looks comfortable on Amir here, doesn't he? And they can't quite get the red buff invade they were looking for, as they are forced out. It's a good start to this one. Does head up for Layers to invade the purple on the left side, because Only Warriors have to kind of over-rotate to red to defend that. Scarabs just walk over and take purple in that window. This Gold Fury still seems like a point of focus here, Myth, as the Only Warriors stand around it, and it looks like they are indeed planning to start this up. But inbound nearby, will they stick to this when it's contested is the question. Veronica's way here, but now they're dropping it for the fight. But another good wall from inbound sends them back, and the Fury and thoughts of it have been left behind. They are done trying to grab it, and Neil Maw gonna lose his Magai's cloak here. Good work from inbound.
Could even lose his life. Nice wall, forces the blink. Athena forced to use that relic defensively, and now the Solar Scarabs establish a defensive positioning around the Gold Fury. Oni Warriors immediately turned on. Now they got to work their way forward.
Still not very many ultimates in the 3v3 for the Warriors. Typhoon big, but Neil Maw still alive. Zapman, the original Desert Fury, gets very little value there, and they've dropped the DPS on the Fury entirely. But it's a full 5-on-5, 10 members here at the Fury, 13.5 minutes in, so Nika says, fine, I will step on the gas pedal and move in. Beads allows him to keep up the aggression, and inbound will fall for Nika's trouble. The first kill of this engagement goes to the Warriors.
Man, that ultimate from Zapman effectively just kneecaps the Scarabs' opportunity there. They can't keep moving forward. They can't even go for the Gold Fury because they don't have the burn potential either. And the Oni Warriors capitalize on it perfectly. Nika, with a little bit of a slow rotation, actually rewarded by the fact that the Scarabs use 4 of their ultimates before the fight actually starts off in earnest. Now, finally, 14 minutes in the game, we're starting to see a little bit of that disparity start to grow. Oni Warriors now about 1,500 gold in the lead, as well as 7 and 3 on the slash lines. Experience starting to leak their way as well, and they're not done. Gold Fury wasn't enough. Might as well take Pyromancer as well.
This is what you wanted. You wanted for those fights to lead somewhere, and lead it did, right to a Fury, right to a Pyromancer, and right to our first real lead of the game. As you said, about 1,500 gold or so in their favor. They've got the lead over in duo in the jungle as well. Looks like maybe Neek is a little bit behind SOT, but for the most part, that's pretty close too. The Warriors now in a great spot to continue to force these fights. And I wonder if we're going to continue to see these on her transformation from Dardes, because that has been where he's gone so far. But maybe that's just for the early game. Maybe we will see some Layers transformations, or as you were saying before, some Tsukiyomi ones soon.
Yeah, ADCs are incredibly good in Season 8, so it makes sense, but until that crit gets finished up, I think he could be better served by turning into the Tsukiyomi or something along those lines, that tankiness and the ability to engage. As Vote engages himself. Inbound goes in with a freeze, but Neil Maw lands with a dunk.
Good use of the ultimate there from Zapman. Gets him out of the taunt coming through from Neil Maw, and Layers here now to provide backup. The cavalry for the Scarabs has arrived. So that is the Beads and Aegis from Vote and Neil Maw's ultimate expended for what? Inbound's Blink and Zapman's ult. Not such a bad trade for the Scarabs there on the left side of the map.
No, Vote going to have to play incredibly safely for the near future. 2 minutes until those defensive relics are available to him again. That's why you see Layers starting to hover his way on the left-hand side. But there's not much to fight over. I think the Oni Warriors could very easily just sit inside their towers, keep farming waves, because really they have no reason to step up. Gold Fury's dead, Pyromancer's dead as well, and 0 presence on the right-hand side from the Scarabs means that there's no threat of the Giant itself getting pulled.
Yeah, the thing about getting all the neutral objectives on the map is you got them, you know. Now they get a little bit of breathing room, yeah. And they don't have to worry so much about a small moment where they've lost the power play, giving an advantage over to the Scarabs instead. So we can do a bit of a build roundup now here, Myth. It's Stone Cutting Sword into Erendite for Cuvo Fred. Does that not belie the mission he's on? Once he picks a target, he wants to be all over them. And I think that very possible A Thebes for Neilma behind the Magai's cloak and crit on the way for both of these hunters. Looks like the Oni Warriors are starting to hit their stride, but so are the Scarabs. Some key items finished on both sides.
Yeah, Inbound just not finishing up that Sunder, meaning that if he does find a freeze on someone with no beads available, should be able to do at least 50% of their HP bar on his own, and with any help, the rest of it as well. Zapman so far forward!
And he didn't have beads, or he just got them back, so he uses them in that exchange. He must have just gotten them back, but they are gone now for the trouble of looking for a purple buff invade. But Vote Slow makes it out with that airstrike, retreats back to the safety of his tier 2 tower. Meanwhile, Dardez is in an awful position and locked down. Uses the relics, turns into the Wukong, and that's all of his cooldowns expended in a losing effort as he's claimed by the Scarabs. What a bounce back from the Chaos side team.
But this is where the Scarabs have been winning their fights consistently this entire match. It's been purple and red buff invade after invade for the Chaos side team. And now, with Dardus dead for 25 seconds, they can at least take away this tier 1 tower. Tier 1 mid tower, one of the most valuable tier 1s in the game. It's going to make it harder to retreat from Gold Fury fights or Fire Giant fights. The Scarabs exposing the tier 2 as well, essentially creating a win condition. If they're able to strip away one more fight as cleanly as they did this last one, that could completely even out the match.
Take a look here at the relic selection from Nika. It's an upgraded Phantom for him. Now, I think Phantom upgraded is almost good enough to get on its own, but is this the threat from Inbound's wall that has them picking it up at this point in the game, or is it for all that mitigation?
It's likely going to be because of the walls, the pillar as well, but that mitigation is nothing to sneeze at. I know Hindu Man in particular has been yelling about it for almost an entire calendar year now. Since I started this job, he's been saying, hey, Mifflin, do you know about the mitigation on Phantom? It's so good. I don't even understand why people buy Shell. And he's certainly right. It does change the face of these team fights, but that utility that it brings against Inbound, especially in Season 8 with how narrow these jungle lanes are, is going to be huge for his team.
Still no beads for Zapman, so he gets taunted, but they don't have Cubo Fred there for the follow-up. But I'm with you, man. This Phantom is something that we might get to see some value from. Certainly something Hindu Man is excited to see here, but also speaks to the impact Inbound's having, or at least the impact that Amir has on these games, as Neilma gets caught out by Inbound exactly like that. But this time there's a turnaround. Inbound too alone, too much a solo agent. He pays the price for stepping up.
I think Inbound could have got a little bit further away there. He had so much movement speed that he could have potentially escaped, but turns around to find the Sunder, and he also finds the grayscale screen for his troubles as well. Oni Warriors, when the push comes to shove, when there's something to fight over, they show up. Another Fury going their way.
I liked it. I like the idea that the Warriors are like, listen, if it's a fight over nothing, the Scarabs can have it. But I mean, if there's stakes, we're winning it. So I like the idea that maybe they're even more engaged or just more set up for a fight where I think they're planning around objective. I think that probably does bear truth in it, that they're more prepared around the fights that have an objective on the backside of them. So it's a big lead. Maybe not the biggest, though, for the Warriors. About 3K gold, a little under that in their favor. Experience still favoring them in the jungle, and that's about it. They're actually a bit behind in mid, where Baronic has kept his head down a bit and looked for farm. Pyromancer, though, in the sight of the Scarabs, and they should be able to grab this one for free. No Warriors are nearby. So a little bit of an added boon over to the Scarab side, but nothing too crazy for the Warriors. That wall by Inbound just barely doesn't lock Neilma off, but a good one nonetheless. Is it time already for a Fire Giant dance, Smith? I mean, we're only 20 minutes into this, but Pyro and Gold are both down.
Yeah, majority of the carries approaching level 20. I think, if anything, now is going to be a great time to start this Fire Giant dance. Wow. It seems like the Warriors absolutely agree. Neilma starts it up. Inbound, going to be the first one forward. If he gets taunted, last time it cost him his life instantly. That's why he's playing a little bit more hesitant around the stepping forward, and just showing that barest amount of face was enough to scare the Oni Warriors off of the Giant itself.
Yeah, Dardez isn't here. He's way on the left side of the map. And there goes Neilma, forcing the beats from Zapman. They have been on permanent cooldown this game, thanks to the pressure from the Warriors, and it looked like Desert Fury basically tickles Neilma at this point in the game, too. So Blink for Inbound and Beads for Zapman down, but Neilma's Blink down as well. And Zapman doesn't have the ultimate. That's a pretty big trade in favor of the Warriors. He has no CC immunity to rely on.
Yeah, next taunt kills Zapman. That's as much analysis as you need, right? If he gets taunted out, his life is essentially forfeit with the draft that the Oni Warriors have here, which is why you see the Scarabs. Again, they were in an advantage state, forced to reset now because of the utility tools that they'd already expended. I'm surprised to see the Oni Warriors aren't willing to group up as 5 and try and force a fight, though. while they do have this advantage for themselves, maybe they realize that the Scarabs aren't willing to put up a defense, but it feels like a missed opportunity again. Might as well at least set up around the Fire Giant, I'm thinking.
Yeah, it looked like you had the right call there for a minute, but maybe the Warriors were only willing to do it if the Scarabs just weren't there at all, and they've completely changed their calculus in the face of it. But look at Dardes with the bubble build. Gore said on the
Good
desk. It's that fourth item in that build where we typically see these mages show us if they want to flex into some defense. They'll lock down the Deso and the Rada Tahuti first, but Magi's here. I mean, you gave the analysis for Neil. Does that apply the same to Dardes, or do you wish there was a little bit more damage in that slot?
I think Dardes picks up Magi's cloak because he's been having such a hard time moving forward inside the stealth. I mean, inbound doing the old TF2 strat of a Pyromancer looking for a spy, just throwing out the freeze every time he hears the stealth, and it's worked out pretty consistently. Even in the last team fight around Gold Fury, SOT just transforms into a cat, stuns Dardes out of his stealth. At least now he should be able to get his damage out before he falls, but it's a tough trade-off. You really want to have that one-shot capacity that the Morrigan brings, and Magi is certainly trading off a ton of power.
And for a while there, Doom Orb was something we saw in her for so often. We gave her the movement speed. Looks like that's not the case anymore, though, as the Fire Giant now started up, and it's being burned quickly. The crit build from Vote is hurting it alongside Cuba. Fred, in fact, the Scarabs don't get here even near in time. The Warriors take it. Looks like Typhoon was close, but it was not enough as inbound. Life taken away by Cubo. Fred, Veronic, the next one up in Vote, puts him down. Sing it to layers, and just like that, Fire plus a 3 for 0. Apparently waiting made it super clean.
Yeah, look, they were waiting for their opportunity, right? And they found it the second they did. Look, if a team fight ends and two of your teammates are still at 100% HP and mana, it means that the Scarabs really weren't ready to put up a defense around that Fire Giant.
Right.
Maybe a steal attempt from inbound, but he gets it caught out the second he steps forward, dies after the Fire Giant as well. Layers of Baronic get caught out themselves as well, and it costs them so much. Tier 2 tower falls, and really, what's that man going to do here? Just watch from a distance as his Phoenix falls as well.
Not a whole lot for him to try and do. We see SOT is pushed out and looking for some invades in the jungle, maybe push up some waves, but that was so clean for them. I think that was Layers' Typhoon there at the tail end, almost stole away the FG, but just was not enough. Either way, that cooldown was down by the time the actual fight started, and I think that was music to the ears of the Oni Warriors who've been buying and now have their third Magi's Cloak of the game. One for Cuvo, one for Dardes, and one for Vote. They say, you're not slowing us down with your big AoE CC. We're going to get to pay to cause some problems.
Yeah, here's the thing about how I don't care about your CC. I don't. I did invest a lot of gold for it, and I am sacrificing power, but it's just working out for him. And I think it's mainly working out because of the Susano pick. Layers has been largely absent from these team fights. He hasn't really been able to benefit from the Magi's Cloaks getting burned off. Usually we see inbound move forward, wall someone off, freeze off the Magi's, and then fall back, and then 60 seconds later the Magi's are just up again. We haven't seen consistent CC from the entirety of the Scarabs, so this Magi's Cloak is getting infinite value. At this point, I think they could have benefited from just not purchasing beads at all because they have not been forced to use them ever.
Wow, take a look at these damage charts. The lowest member on the Warriors, Neil, is ahead of the highest member on the Scarabs, Zapman. If that doesn't tell you the story visually, then I'm not sure what needs to. It looks like Zap split push down that tier 2 over in right in the old solo lane, but Oni Warriors could care less. They're in the left lane and looking to push down this left side Phoenix, but they've kind of broken up from this positioning a bit. But no, they're winning with a blink from Neomar. Taunt brings it inbound, and he's down to half HP already. And they'll continue their push into the Phoenix, knowing now the best front line the Scarabs have cannot afford to step forward. And the Phoenix should pay the price. Nika gonna look for Layers as well and ends up heavily committed. But he shreds Layers, so much damage off the piercing Moonlight SOT, the next target, but makes it up to the Somersault Cloud. Oni Warriors though, job done. They'll leave this left side alone with the Phoenix removed. Maybe come grab this mid tier 2.
Nika is forced to use the Phantom there, which is pretty huge. Now the Scarabs will have an opportunity to isolate members of the Oni Warriors with inbound's wall, but even when he is able to find it, the damage output isn't quite there. Got to give a shout out to Zapman with his pillar inside of that last fight. Had he not dropped it, inbound's life would have been forfeit. Keeps his support alive for the defense one more time. But there's only one thing left to defend. Right side Phoenix and left side Phoenix already been down for the Scarabs, but Oni Warriors, they're hesitant. They want to find their first win here. Gonna cross their T's and dot their I's. Only 30 seconds left on the Fire Giant. Might as well not take that risk. Head back to base, pick up the Pyromancer, and regroup for the dance one more time.
I mean, but doesn't this kind of look like the Oni Warriors we thought we were getting, where Neo Ma is so good at initiating for this team as he's done here all day, where Dardes is executing on a very difficult mage inside the Morgan at a high level. He kind of led the early game for him on his on-her transformations, where Cubo Fred is allowed to be a solo agent and take the fights where he sees them. This feels like what we thought we were getting when we first heard about this Oni Warriors team, and it's good to finally see it coming to fruition.
Yeah, just a couple of weeks it took them to find their footing here, and now they are certainly benefiting from it. But the Oni Warriors do still need to finish out this game and the set after it as well.
That's
Can't
true.
count out the Scarabs just yet. They have been making strides this year, and they look very good considering how many rookies they have. But now the game does simplify Finch on the defense. Are the Scarabs going to be willing to step up to this Fire Giant? I don't think they should. And I didn't think they should for the last one either, and they certainly still did. So we might see someone on the Chaos Tide start to work their way forward. The entirety of the Oni Warriors are spotted out by this ward. That ambush not going to work out this time, but the Oni Warriors don't know it. The Scarabs might be able to turn this around if they're able to use this increased vision advantage. But both teams just kind of stand each other down in the jungle.
That's what it seems like. But from the Scarabs, though, how do you like this next fight? Both teams have finished off some key starter item upgrades. Pendulums, Compassions, Embraces all finished here at this point. Bumba's out there as well. But there's the re-engage, catching Scarabs off guard. It was so quick and so complete. Inbound is the target. There's the Piercing Moonlight as in comes Nika to finish the job, but Layers somehow falls elsewhere. Dardes makes his way into the back line, and he pulls the trigger yet again on another Tsukuyomi ultimate to close the gap. They've already lost inbound. They have already lost their jungler.
Dardes.
And Zatman and Baronic shall be next. Nika gets himself a triple kill as he takes care of 3, and this game is done and dusted. Big one for the Warriors.
The Scarabs, man, it felt like they might have been able to spring a trap there. They had so much vision advantage, so the second the Oni Warriors start to back up, the Scarabs just assume that they had started up the Fire Giant itself. Unfortunately, that's not what they were looking for. They were going for your necks, and they absolutely take it. Finch, these Oni Warriors, man, they're starting to get better and better every week. It feels like they found their stride a little bit here.
I'm with you. We still haven't maybe seen enough to completely say it, but doesn't that look like what we want this a team to eventually be doing week in and week out? Man, that was scary. I was with you. Were you expecting the Warriors to be pulling a trap, man, to be springing their trap card and ready? But that blink and initiation completely seemed to catch the Scarabs off guard. Wasn't much they could do to try and react on that one. Any big adjustments you want the Scarabs to make here?
Oh yeah, ban Athena, ban Tsukuyomi, or at least pick one of them for yourselves, man. I feel like the Warriors may have gotten away with a bit of a ludicrous draft if the trade-off is on her. I mean, I think the Warriors got more value out of the on her themselves.
That's right, turning into that with the Morgan looked pretty good. Congrats to the Warriors on their Game 1 win, but this set is not over. Quick break, then we're right back to break everything down.
After a Game 1 win, the Oni Warriors put themselves one game away from their first win this year in the SPL. And I will say, this is such a close matchup in the Battleground, but I also think it's a close matchup in the jersey department. I love both of the jerseys with these two teams. Thanks to Insight Apparel Company for partnering with us to provide these jerseys, t-shirts, hoodies, all that sort of fun stuff. Shop.smiteproleague.com is where you'll go to check out some of that attire, all that apparel. Oni Warrior Scarabs, both some cool jerseys there. So shout out once again to Insight Apparel Company for partnering with us this year. Gormizer's still with me to break down game number 1. Gore, do you have something to say on the jerseys before we move on?
I got a thought for you. So,
Okay.
this is, for everyone watching, this is going to mean nothing. But in the studio, the hallway down to the
perfect.
soundstage?
Yes,
we
I
should
do.
we should frame those jerseys and have them on the walls there. That would be such a sick
should.
thing to walk through. Like, all the players walk through there to get to the player booths. Of course, we have
That
to
would be
be
cool.
in the studio for that to work. But look, Dave, this is an idea. This is live brainstorming. I'm going to pitch that.
I'm
Hindu,
hoping-
if you're watching, this is my pitch for that. Otherwise, I'll mention it
Right.
to you later.
Hindu, if you're not watching, you're old, something like that. Anyway, let's move
Yeah,
on
that.
here after game number 1. Gore, this one started off with what felt like the Scarabs in a pretty contested matchup here with the Warriors kind of playing on the back foot, but then it started getting pulled back, and it was just pick after pick after pick. I think the Athena pick for Neil ended up looking really, really good. We see now why she's banned effectively 100% of the time, now 2 for 2 in her games here in the SPL. It's just a scary Warriors draft, and they made good on the potential that it brought.
I mean, I was worried about Neil. Anytime Neil gets something that can control the game on its own, you should be scared because Neil is that kind of player, but I think he looked really good. I was also worried a little bit about whether or not Nemesis was going to be able to show up at the same extent that we would see layers on the other side, but we got to see Cuvo be a big part of this, Neil be a big part of this in terms of setup, and it really allowed Dardes, who spent a majority of the early game transitioning into on her, but still, that Morrigan just really showcase her power out of the mid lane. Dardes kind of returning to form. I was missing this, something that Dardes did last year. His Hera's, his Aphrodites at the time, his Morgans. Like, there were gods that you had to ban against Dardes because he was just too good at them in mid, and it made it so much easier for the rest of SSG then for Season 7 to do that. And I'm hoping that we get to see that eventually this year in the Warriors because Dardes is a force to be reckoned with.
He is, and what a turnaround from Nika this game. I'm glad we got a little of the Tsukiyomi highlights in it. 6-1 and 4. The one death was a solo kill by Solo or Troll earlier on in the game. So a game that did not start off well for Nika. That ended fantastically. 10 straight kills or assists after that one death to end with maybe the cleanest looking KDA in the game, though Neo and Vote a couple undying pairs down there in the duo lane. 15,000 damage for both Vote and Nika. That sure feels good. Nobody from the Solar Scarabs eclipsing that, what is that, 5 digits worth of damage. Yeah, don't do math on cast, including counting to 5. Apparently that's dangerous here as well.
It's scary,
But
man.
Gore, it is scary. I also loved what I saw from Cuvo Fred. Like, it's been a slow start to the year for this Warrior squad. They still have to they still have to win one more game, close out this set.
Yep.
But the Nemesis pick, I think, looked pretty good here. Neither here nor there. She's kind of middling as far as where she ends up falling down. But we see more and more junglers start to go towards this pick, and Cuvo Fred shows us why.
It's definite time for draft changes, I think, from the Scarabs. It feels like Athena, Tsukuyomi, the Morrigan, all kind of stacking up. Like, those three separate maybe aren't necessarily as difficult to deal with, but the three of them stacked there for the Warriors definitely made things kind of shift. All the cards are in their court, right? Everything is ready for them. But this is also where the Scarabs were last week. We were talking about them. It didn't look too good. The first game they played against the Valkyries was not necessarily as one-sided. The Warriors definitely controlled this, I think, a little more than the Valkyries. But the Scarabs were able to bounce back in Game 2 and Game 3, so I don't want to count them out yet. They might just be one of those teams that has really good adjustments. But the problem is, and this is what's interesting to me, this was the first game where Tiamat was neither picked nor banned, right? She was completely ignored this time around. First off,
right.
I want to say shout-outs to her. It only took her 2 weeks before some of these pro teams tossed her out. But you get things like the Yanis ban, you mentioned the Scylla ban as well, targeting Baronic. Like, if target bans are going to peel apart the Scarabs, they're going to end up suffering a very similar fate. So I want to see how they can adjust to that. The Chang'e didn't necessarily look bad. Same thing for, like, the Anhur. The Ymir looked really good early on as well. It just felt like the pieces didn't get to come together and fully unite there for the Scarabs. So that's when I want to see, I guess, adjustments into game number 2.
Right, it happening once is an outlier. Of course, I'm talking about Tiamat neither being picked nor bans. It happening multiple times is what establishes a trend. So that's something we'll keep our eyes on. If that trend continues, right, not just this game, but across different sets. She's still so strong. Difficult to see a world where there's no Tiamat priority at all over the remaining games we have today and here this weekend. But if we are in a world, Gore, where teams are starting to realize that this Tiamat pick isn't necessary to pick or ban, that does open up a couple of extra ban slots here and there. I think the Oni Warriors played it perfectly. They could have taken away the Athena or the Tiamat. They weren't scared of, I'm assuming, the Tiamat, and maybe the Scarabs should have been a little bit more scared of the Athena. At any rate, that's where the pick ban strategy can start to change. When suddenly there's one ban slot that is now opened up. If you feel like you can play around this pick. I want to look at the jungle pick, though, after game number 1 a little bit here for the Scarabs. They gave Layers this Susano. You know, it had high damage, high solo, high kind of late-game carry potential. Do you think that's an area of the draft that maybe the Scarabs need to pivot away from?
Well, I think it's definitely their most flexible area right now. I mean, looking at the bans from last game, right? Loki got banned away by the Scarabs. Not necessarily something I think we've seen Cuvo running as much. Cuvo did run it last week, though, so it is like kind of worth keeping it in the wheelhouse, right, for the Scarabs. Is it something that deserves to be in that top ban? Well, maybe it's something that Layers could make work and do wonders with in the jungle, similar to what we saw Johnny do yesterday. They also ended up seeing, I think, set ban and a Fenrir ban that came through. So there weren't as many, I want to say, just blanket top-tier assassins, especially with Tsukiyomi getting scooped up by the Warriors early on. Susano, I like him. I think he's going to be solid, but I do think he maybe needs a little more wiggle room than what he had in that game. Can do a lot. Maybe could do a little bit better. I think I saw some people in chat saying that Layers loves playing him and plays him a lot on his stream, so maybe I'm just getting the discredit of not a great Layers game there, but I do think there's a lot of potential for the jungle to flourish here. Layers is definitely one of the players that I'm putting a lot of weight on in this, but mainly because I know he's as good as he is, so I trust that whatever they give him is going to be able to do well.
Right, it's the conversation we have around the execution. It's high potential, but requires the game to go right for you. So I like the pick, and we'll see if I like the idea behind the pick. We'll see if the Solar Scarabs end up liking the strategy behind the pick. But maybe they feel like Layers on a different style of God has more success here in game number 2. Only time will tell. Picks and bans for game 2 have kicked off here. Giannis taken away once again by the Oni Warriors. It's got to feel good and bad, I think, at the same time for Baronic, that you've proven that you can play the God at a high enough level that a team like the Oni Warriors wants to take it away. Feels bad because you'd really like to play that pick on your side. Yamoja to immediately follow up. And then a Sobek on the other side. So through the first 3 bans here, Gore, things have stayed the same.
Yeah, and this is one of the conversations we were kind of having on Waiting Room, specifically around the Giannis, right? So Yamoja's in a really weird area. I don't know anymore if she belongs up there. I still think she's a great God, but when we've seen her get through, she hasn't really been doing too hot. So that's really the question. I'd have to go look up her specific stats, but I think there's a lot of question marks, at least for me, around her as a support right now, especially when Ymir and Sobek and Athena are able to dominate that role so much better. Maybe she isn't the end-all, be-all. Of course, at pro-level play, that was always where the difference was, right? Those Riptide placements were very solid. So I want to say keep your eye on Yamoja. Just throughout the SBL over the next couple of weeks as someone to watch. But the real question marks have been around whether or not this Giannis ban is worthwhile. Was he really a worthy pick, or was it just a couple of players? Granted, this is still Baronic, and of course next set it would still be her a win, so if he is getting banned a lot, maybe it's just target bans against those 2 players, but I think this is the transition. He was in the top 5 for the most picked in week 1. It makes sense that he's going to start disappearing from the mid lane.
I think for what it's worth, the Dragons did have that doubleheader in week number 1, so saw a little extra play. But then, of course, to that point, also saw high play with Baronic there in that set in week number 1, so not surprising that we saw Giannis a good bit. A self-pivot here from the Oni Warriors. Athena self-banned away when the Scarabs hadn't looked towards her just yet. Tiamat still not banned out or picked here. Looks like a run back, but the Oni Warriors at some point are going to have to change up at least their support pick in this one. Tsukiyomi for Nika. Look, you died solo early on in that game to SOT, who still has the chance to play the Sun Wukong one more time here, if the Oni Warriors end up picking around the jungle pick here. But then Nika, after that one solo death in solo lane, made this Tsukiyomi solo look really, really good, Gore. The ability to engage and then drop down damage and CC afterwards is just too hard to compete with, it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to see this because with that Nemesis lock-in, like I was going to say it's flexible, so technically you could toss it to whoever you wanted, but as you called it, especially with Nemesis locked in, it's solo. Also, like, I don't do this often. I'm going to do it live now. I'm going to pat myself on the back. I typed in the Morgan looking at the top 3 because Warriors, like, looking at what they banned the Athena because they know they're going to pick Tsukiyomi and they don't want the Scarabs to be able to pick up anybody, at least in retaliation to it. You get Ymir on her. And looking at their top 3, last time they picked Jingwei, and, you know, Nemesis maybe isn't necessarily as high priority as she is here. I think picking her back up is going to be good for you, especially against Ymir Wukong. But I was looking at it and just, where do you want your mid lane to go? On her was working well for Dardes last time. You've got great transformations in this game already. I love the fact that they went for this, and it's exactly what I really wanted to steer them into. I kind of like tried to will it into existence by typing her down in my stat sheet before she was locked in, just because I think it's such a clean pickup for them, especially if you get the same level of play. No matter what the Scarabs go for, you've got 2 great frontliners on their side already to transform into, 2 great assassins on your team to transform into, and then the carry that Dardes, we have to give him credit. He's the guy who plays on her mid at the highest level and does it better than pretty much anybody else. So I like the fact that he's getting his hands on this transforming god.
That's right. The versatility that it brings to the table, just so good for a team that has the potential. I'm not going to say they're all the way there yet because they've had some struggles early on, but has the potential to be as coordinated as the Oni Warriors are. It's the same top 3 and then a pivot from the Solar Scarabs with their 4th pick here. No Chang'e mid for Baronic this time, but Gore, the rise of Raijin, I don't think can be ignored at this point. 5 games played, 80% win rate. The metrics are all on the side of success here for the mid laner.
Yeah, I really like Raijin. Look, he looked good last year. I think last year was the one where I was kind of throwing question marks at him, but that's just because for, I want to say maybe years we hadn't gotten to see too much of him, but now he's going to be able to make a homestay. And I like what he brings to the mid lane. Alongside the rest of this team, it's just really good damage. This pick I love, but I'm not sure I can get behind as much. Neil played this, I think, the most last week. I'd have to go look at the individual breakdown where it was able to come through. Are we looking at the Warriors? They played it twice. They lost with it twice. And so I don't even know who the third.
I don't know who the third was, right?
Was
they didn't win,
throughout
though.
all of that one. I'd have to go scroll through all of the teams. But, I mean, that's the thing that I think is a little rough right now. Bacchus, I love Bacchus. But is he going to be able to stand up to something like the Ymir? That's where the big questions have to be, and that's where some of my hopes really start to fall down. I think Inbound played that so clean last game that I expect him to keep it up throughout this game. So as long as their duo lane goes the same way, Bacchus is probably going to struggle early on, maybe late game really become that threat.
Potential counterplay as well between the Ymir freeze and the longer channeled stun from the Bacchus there in that lane. So things to look out for, absolutely, in the duo lane. And then what we're going to assume is Erlang Shen in for layers. So there is a pivot here, Goremizer, from the decimate, backline, assassin-y type god. Not that Erlang Shen can't do that. As a matter of fact, if you build him the right way, he can do it just as well. But that big ultimate, the 9 turns blessing, great for engage, some sustain there as well. Do you like this pivot, putting layers on the Erlang Shen?
I love that. I think this pickup actually is going to give them a lot out of the jungle that I don't even want to say Susano didn't give them. I think it's just going to be a hyper version of that. I think Erlang has been a little more consistent in the jungle from what we've seen. Like you said, that 9 turns blessing, you get a nice big taunt, easy setup for either a Ymir freeze or just straight up follow up from Anher and Raijin, like the team fight potential for him. But along with the pin, the combo that you can have with Raijin, throwing the Raiju out there for damage, as well as setting up someone like Zapman for stuns. Like there's so much that can really get the brain whirring about an Erlang Shin there in the jungle. I'll throw it out there while I have it, though. The Bacchus was picked up also by the Titans. I don't know if that necessarily instills that much success in my brain for it. So Neil has a lot of work, not only just kind of going up against his week 1 performance on this god to deal with it. When I look at this draft in a vacuum, Dave, top 3 for the Warriors really wins me back over because of what they were able to do last game. The Jingwei looks really good as well. But that Bacchus is the wild card, and I think it all depends on Neil this time around to make it work.
Let's see if the Solar Scarabs in Game 2 can find the advantage in the duo lane. It starts right now.
Thank you, Dolson and Gormizer on the desk. Still Finch and Myth here, and we provided the views by the one and only Doug back there on the camera. So largely the same here for the Warriors with the composition here, Myth, except what I think you just got to call a downgrade, Neoma on the Bacchus rather than the Athena. Meanwhile, Solar Scarabs elect to take Baronic on this Raiden. I don't think Scylla was picked or banned in this one, but this Raiden is what they feel like is their best tool here. Where do you want to start?
Well, we can start with Neil because I think it's hard to say downgrade when you force someone into one of their own signature picks, right? But certainly if we're going by meta alone, Athena's certainly better. I think that's
well, does Bacchus have a global
clear.
ult? I'm just like wondering.
No, not a global ult. Doesn't give his team damage mitigation, but he does have a stun into a knockup, and he can make the opposition drunk, which is pretty sick. Cool. But the Scarabs, I think the huge talking point is we need to see more from Layers in the early game. That Susano was largely absent for the majority of that match. Only a couple of ultimates, even really rung true towards the end game as well. But I think Erlang Shen is really going to be a pick that he can flex his muscles on in the early. He really needs to get involved, and I think he can, especially considering he's got a pretty easy target inside of the Morrigan. Again, even easier now that he's Erlang, though.
I think we talked about this start in a Jade Dragon set earlier, but it looks like this has just become kind of the optimal start where you have your duo start at purple, it's jungle and mid on red, and then jungle separates off to go do the rest of that farm on the solo side of the map. I believe it was Jade Dragon we saw do that first, but maybe just something that's come up in scrims is kind of the optimal way to start. What are your thoughts on if we're going to just keep on seeing this?
I think it can certainly happen. It's going to help out your side lanes a lot, allowing them to get some farm for themselves. And Zardes forced to use the beads here. Cubo Fred also forced to retreat, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. Solar Scarabs able to strip away some of those relics, but do not find the kill inbound. This is something he did in Game 1 as well, this early rotation. Now that beads are burned, though, it can work.
There's the blink into the freeze, but Cubo Fred has the dash. I think maybe would have preferred to get Dardes there on that one, but just didn't pan out. He'll settle for Cubo Fred, get some poke, and force him to back up. But no beads to burn there. Cubo Fred started with the blink in this one. But I'm with you, man. I think this start is interesting. I wonder if it's ever going to trickle down into the games that I'm playing, get to buy casual, like 1,300 more games. But clearly here in the SPL, this is a quick start that gets your duo lane off to a good start and lets your jungler get a lot of farm down there, essentially alone, as Neil Ma rotates on Zapman. The stun lands and Zap never beads, and he proves to be correct, just makes it back to the tower easy peasy. Now it's Inbound's turn for the freeze into the Impale, but Vote, equally stubborn, doesn't use his beads and stays alive.
That CC chain from the Oni Warriors right there just put a smile on my face. The flop immediately into a secondary knockup from Jingwei, and then he lands into the stun. I mean, there was no point of interaction there. Dude just had to use his beads or sit down for a full 3 seconds, and he survives. Zapman, a veteran, knows when to hold him and when to fold him, and this time holds it.
Inbound looking for a purple invade, but Vote resets, though, takes quite a bit of damage from the ice carpet there. So Inbound now defending as Zapman looks for the purple, and Layers is the one on his way. So if the Oni Warriors get too stubborn here, they're going to end up setting up for a gank. Looks like purple was invaded, but Layers came all this way and then backed on up. Perhaps he didn't think Neoma as a viable target there all on his own with the purple already secured.
Yeah, not much going to get gained if you go into a Bacchus at this point. Damage mitigation from the drink, as well as just him still having flop. I think Neilma's pretty safe there. Layers makes a good decision to go ahead and back up. And speaking of Layers, I'm just now taking a peek at his build. Is that a light blade in the first slot? Normally it's going to be a katana immediately to stone cutting sword or something along those lines, but instead Layers going for a little bit more so of an unorthodox build. I'll be excited to see where he decides to go with that. Is it going to be Executioner? Is it going to be Kin Size? Or really, where's he going with it? At all. Full stop.
Yeah, I mean, as Doug pointed out, we have a great example of what the classic attack speed jungle build is. You start with the Eye of the Jungle into the Katana 1, but you're seeing the exact opposite over there from Layers. Not the exact opposite, but just different. Eye of the Jungle into the Lightblade as you already covered. So yeah, maybe it is an early XC or Kens or something he's planning to prioritize in this build. We'll get our chance to see before too long, though, once that build rounds out. Take a look at where everyone else is. Things look fairly standard. Looks like Neilma agrees with inbound this time. There is no benevolence picked up for our supports this time, which eventually goes into the compassion. Not going to be the case this time around.
Yeah, it feels so bad to get benevolence yourself and then just be falling behind naturally. So if the enemy is going to be a little bit greedy, might as well do the exact same. And Neilma, I think, could benefit from it a little bit more so. His ability to engage the fight and also finish them on his own is there. Bacchus has a ton of burst potential, so a couple extra levels under his belt can only help him out. Inbound, already taking over to level 5 onto that wave. We'll see if Neilma is able to match that instead. Walks into the jungle. Is going to be an advantage state for the Chaos team.
The Scarabs, I think, dropped a ward on that red buff pit on the Order side. They'll have the information now going forward on how viable that red buff invade is if they want to look for it a little later on. They are slightly ahead in goal. Nothing really, though, worth kind of stopping and worrying about here at this point as they continue their onslaught on the opposite side of the map. Now here Layers is, I think, rotating in for a blue buff invade, and they have that blue buff camp warded as well. So that is clearly the game plan here for these Scarabs, to be on time for the Order side buff spawns, to look for these invades, and to out-rotate here with Layers, who is just on a mission to get to these buffs as soon as he can.
Yeah, Layers power farming at the end of the jungle. Neilma getting aggressed on, still not level 5, forced to jump out and use the blink. Tough situation. Shards of Ice is the trade there. Ymir finding value.
And Cuvo Fred in danger of falling here for first blood. The cudgel and the slows and the pin all land. Just not enough damage. Cuvo Fred, as always, walking the tightrope and remaining elusive. Now, inbound, though, on that trade with Neilma, did blink in. I think missed the freeze and dropped Shards of Ice, as you already covered. So, I mean, maybe just because Neilma didn't have an ult to use, he came out ahead there. He's got it now, though. And inbound, I'm not quite able to lock him down the way he would have liked. So all kinds of action. And it's the Scarabs looking to start it up.
Yeah, the Scarabs have been playing pretty aggressively. It's kind of reminiscent. Oh, again, I called them the spiritual successor to Obey recently, but I feel like that identity is still there. They want to be this early game aggressive team, and it's usually rooted in aggression through the support inbound, starting off the majority of their fights. I just really want to see them start working together with Layers. I thought these two coming to the league together would really be able to Voltron up considering the experience they have with each other, but so far, even in Game 2, Layers largely absent.
Neilma aggressive on the Moronic there, but Moronic does not blink. He doesn't use beads and stays calm, so Neil doesn't get much for his trouble of that leaping. But I'm with you, man. Don't you think there should have been some innate synergy from their console days where they were dominating? And look, and it's still very, very early. I think that in all of our judgments of these teams, we're a little bit ahead of ourselves. It's a long year. There's going to be a ton of time for the complexion and strategies of these teams to change. But early, you know, not quite on the same targets the way I think we might have expected from it.
No, it's almost as if there's a slight desync in what they're looking to do. Layers much more focused on invading side camps. Be it Game 1, it was the purple buff and the red buff. Game 2, seems like he's really keeping his eyes over towards Solo as Dardes transforms into the on her. He loves it.
But it was miscommunication between him and Neo. They came off the target, and now Dardes in an awful position. SOT gets first blood. Neilma might be behind, but in comes the backup as Layers finds the second kill of this game. But Cuvo Fred does get Layers inbound, goes down as well to make it 2 for 2, and Nika remains hungry. A double kill as he finds Baronic to make it 3 for 2 in the very first engagement. And now Zapman is here, the ADC, rotating across the map entirely, getting involved. But they might have lost the numbers advantage. It's a triple kill for Nika, who made his impact known.
Look, Nika's nuts, alright? This guy rotates over and turns a lost fight into a deicide for his team. That Dardes and Neilma, essentially, I can only imagine were not talking to each other inside of that engagement. Dardes goes in alone. Neilma says, wait, what word? Turns back around, loses his own life, and then Nika picking up the slack. I could almost hear him rolling his eyes and sighing, like, oh, I gotta do it all on my own yet again. And he does it. Inbound, walls himself off, trying to isolate himself. Nika lands on him with a piercing moonlight, and it felt like the Amir never knew he was there until he was inside the grayscale screen. And after that, Zapman jumps in aggressively, and loses his life for it. Solar Scarabs, they're trying to keep up this early proactive play, but maybe a little bit too overzealous with it.
There's the jump from Neoma. He eventually concedes he must use it. But I'm with you. It's still a little bit hard for me to shake my initial reaction, which is that the Warriors fumbled the bag there, Neil and Dardes, but such a recovery from Nika. Layers there does not find the 9-turns blessing, and Cubo Fred in trouble, but the shield gets him out, dashes away, and Dardes stuck in the thick of it, and Shard Device brings him low. The Game 1 Dardes we saw, not the Game 2 Dardes we're getting, as Veronic has a chance to find Neoma with the Taiko drums, patiently does it, and sets up for Layers to get a double kill. What a response from the Scarabs. And listen, I like it. They're going to take any fight they can where Nika is not there.
Yeah, the Warriors should know better. Nika wasn't there, Fish. That's the operative word. Don't fight without that man. That's what happens when you try to fall for free. Dardes and Neomon. Dardes certainly been under a lot of aggression this game. It's been constant attempts at ganking him, and it's generally worked out. The Morgan 0-2 now, but even that...
Whoa.
Yeah, well, not the best look on the planet for the rookie coming in, dying to the Manicore there. But as I was saying, Finch, Dardes, despite having all that aggression on him, still benefiting from a level lead? What's up with that?
Yeah, how's that happening? Well, looks like my man Baronic was looking for a little bit of extra farm, just did not quite get it there on that Manticore that ended up getting the better of him. But yeah, this is really, really impressive, isn't it, that somehow Dardes is still ahead with the way this game has gone. And Neoma looking for a buff and fade on red. That did not pan out, but he does escape with his leap. Leap allows him to get away. But I like this. The Warriors don't seem at all deterred by the fact that they literally need Nika in every fight, or things look a lot worse for them. They're still taking fights.
Yeah, Nika's just the icing on the cake for the Warriors, is what they think. In reality, he's the protein that they need. Yeah, they need to have him over there if they want to win these fights cleanly. But already in Game 2, it's a distinct difference in methodology from the Warriors. Didn't it feel like they were never fighting unless there was a huge objective up? They were willing to give up purple buffs, red buffs, blue buffs, whatever they needed to, as long as at the end of the day they got the Gold Fury. But here in Game 2, it's Solar Scares getting aggressive, and then the Warriors doing the exact same thing. It feels like two boxers standing in the center of the ring and just trading punches.
Oh, we've got a big fight. I can't even celebrate what might have been the Manticore's first kill as Layers locks down Neil, and a great freeze from Inbound, who's looked like a different man on the Amir. But Dardes, not to be outdone, does take care of the Chaos side jungler. Baronic fleeing with that Thunder Crash away, but Inbound and Zapman still want to go. That's because SOT is here. But guys, you know what that means. So is Nika, and here he comes, using the piercing moonlight to get involved in the fight all alone. Locks down Inbound, and of course, gets his 4th kill of the game, and they are not done. Cubo Fred gets Baronic, and how could they not have understood that if their solo laner is here, well then so is Nika.
Finch, I was being glib. I didn't think Nika was going to show up and legitimately just wipe the enemy team again, but he does it again. Sets up for the Greater Scorpion. Yeah, Nika absolutely wild. Look at his cam down there. Mans doesn't even care. It didn't shake him at all. He doesn't know how sick he is.
Yeah, I think that Nika's not going to celebrate until they're way down the line with more dubs than this. But don't worry, Nika, we'll celebrate for you. A tremendous, unheard of impact for a solo laner to have 12 minutes of the game, to be 4-0-4, to be a part of all but one of the team's kills, and to have been essential in every fight that's gone their way. That's nigh unheard of for a solo laner to have done.
Especially considering how many of those kills were in solo lane, Finch. I'm going to give you a little bit of quiz here, seeing if you remember the last 12 minutes. None of them. None of those fights were starting over there in the solo lane. Nika has had to work for every single kill he's gotten. Every single assist has been elsewhere on the map. Crazy. I think the Scarab should have a strategy now. It's deal with Nika. Don't let this man do whatever he wants.
Yeah, I mean, you say deal with Nika. I think maybe run from Nika might be another way to do it, right? Just try and have some engagement. They don't have this guy around him. And maybe Myth and I having a little bit of fun here about how impactful Nika has been, but it's been a really good game for him, and there has been truly some trouble for the Warriors when they fought elsewhere on the map and when they've struggled in those other battles. This is, unfortunately, the Manticore's very first kill of the SPL Season 8. Yeah, unlucky for the young man, but... didn't quite go his way. Listen, Baronic is going to have way more highs than lows, okay? Maybe have a little bit of a laugh here, but don't you worry. My man's going to bounce back and have some big moments. You'll forget all about that.
Yeah, here's the thing about how red buff is really strong, and it gets a little buff after you've tanked it up for a little longer, and it gets additional attack speed and power. Maybe Baronic just messing up his calculus a little bit there on clearing out that camp. But I think you're right. He's got a lot of room to grow. This is one of his first years on PC playing competitively, has that console experience behind him. So maybe strategy, it's all there. Still working on that little micro mechanical plays.
Yeah, I'm not worried for the future of this young man. Baronic, I think, one of the young up-and-comers. We'll get a chance to see that, I think, as he has time to grow throughout this season. An unlucky moment there. And really, for all the talk we've done about the Warriors through this early game and how impactful Nika has been, and he has been impactful, he doesn't have much separation between SOT, and really the Warriors don't have much separation, but it looks like Nika is just on the left side of the map now. He's realized he must, and so he is. It's the Gold Fury started up. And I don't think the Scarabs are any the wiser. If they are, they aren't acting like it. And that is a Gold Fury stolen away in the dead of night. Nika making everything happen.
Yeah, Layers and SOT on the right-hand side of the map. They get to hear that notification, the bell of the Gold Fury falling, and unfortunate can only be the things that they say. That's a free one for the Oni Warriors now, and Vote getting aggressive, natural-born killer. You gotta believe he's got backup Cubo in there, but it's Nika that picks up the kill, and how could it be anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, even Nika didn't do that much work on that kill, but I think that at this point they're magnetized to him, drawn to him. As Pyromancer looks to be the trade for the Scarabs, we're at tier 2 in left. Let's see if they can do it. I think their mini is starting to fall off, but with 3 essentially auto-attack focused characters they can. Meanwhile, Neil insisting on defending the Pyromancer alone, now caught inside the Tycho drums.
Phoenix?
This could have been... They are going to go for the Phoenix, and Neil has them distracted. Perhaps that is why he threw his life away, was to guarantee a 14-minute Phoenix. You won't see a whole lot happening sooner than that. And so, the Scarabs go to the Fire Giant and trade Myth. They're going to get it. I don't think anyone knows.
Well, Dardes seems to have spotted out that no one's backed. Hey, Dardes, they're not defending the Phoenix. We got to get over here to the Fire Giant. He can turn into Nika. Finch, bring him back. Get him over there. But
wait, no, the Fire Giant just waxes him all on its own. They
yeah, it's too strong.
Yeah, a little too strong this early in the game. Layers will get his back off, but Dardes, recognizing where they are, stops them in the middle, gets the kill on the Baronic, and makes it a double by putting down Layers. This is backbreaking. This is the Dark Knight Rises Bane, raising you and bringing you over the knee. This is painful.
Was there ever any hope? But there certainly is true despair. Nika finally gonna fall down. 5, 1, and 4 is the solo laner for the Oni Warriors. Inbound, doing his best Nika impression for the last 3 seconds. Also gonna go down as well. 0, 3, and 6 for the support on the side of the Scarabs. And you know who still draws breath throughout all of it? It's not that left side Phoenix, it is the Fire Giant. Oni Warriors strip away the base and now have an opportunity to take their neutral objective.
If, that's the kind of sequence of events you almost never see. I think it is hard to overstate how bad that was for the Scarabs in terms of the end result. And listen, I assume we'll get many a breakdown on what happened on that Fire Giant, but it looked to me as though at least 3 dudes got knocked up there towards the tail end. So maybe the call was correct, but even the actual execution on it left a little bit to be desired. The Oni Warriors, though, masterfully moved around the map, didn't they? Tier 2, Phoenix came back and found a defense, even got a bunch of kills on the back of the FG. I think it is hard to ask for more from these Warriors than what they just showed us.
Finch, I think the only thing they could have done is literally go for the end there, and I think they may have had the opportunity, the Solar of Scarabs. How are you going to predict that they're going to lose the fight to the Fire Giant itself? I think the Warriors make the right strategic decision, but had they had the aerial view like we do, maybe the end of the game.
Yeah, that's maybe the only way they could have done it. Now Layers in trouble. Nico, once again, is going to be the one causing problems and deletes Baronic. Target switching, and it absolutely works. The Raijin having a really tough game this time around. Meanwhile, Dardes just walking up on inbound, finding the stun, even getting the slows, and he should be falling, and he shall right to the hands of Vote. This game rapidly getting out of control for the Scarabs.
Yeah, it feels like the Scarabs tried to stem the bleeding and just stuck another blade in the wound, didn't they? Inbound, now dead for 20 seconds, and the Oni Warriors got free reign on the Tier 2 towers. That man has emotionally checked out of this one, says, look, we're not defending that Tier 2. I'm going to go ahead and try my best to take out this Tier 1, but maybe only earns the ire of Nika if he sticks around, and he stops his back. Nika was about to leave him alone. Now his life is forfeit.
Yeah, and he's really low on mana. He has enough for jump or ult. I doubt for both. Let's see. The pillar comes out, so maybe he does have more than I thought. So leaps in. Nika gonna have to win the battle. As that man knows his only option is to take it. But that's both relics and a losing effort. I don't think there's any shot to use the relics there, but unlucky Zapman gets nothing.
Unlucky, yeah, we'll call it unlucky this time around. Zapman trying to take away a tier 1 tower, at least push up those fire minion waves, loses his life for it. Nika, almost as an afterthought, shows up, starts his rotation, cancels it once he sees the back animation coming through from Zap, and then heads back over to clean up the kill once Zap shows that indecision and where he wants to go. Fire Giant is still alive, and you gotta imagine the team 4,000 gold in the lead 17 minutes in. Should be grouping up around it pretty soon. Inbound, if he steps any further forward than that, could forfeit his life as well. Neilma can't do it on his own, though.
This is getting a little tough. I think the good news is, if you're a Soul of Scarabs fan, that they're not that far behind gold-wise. I mean, 4,000 is pretty tough 18 minutes in with the experience gaps in mid and jungle, but this cannot be permitted to happen for free. Is permit even really on the table here, Myth? How much say do the Scarabs truly have in where this Fire Giant goes? The Warriors grab it. And the left side Phoenix is respawned over there, starting to get a little bit healthy too. That's nice for the Scarabs. They've got that back. Listen, they're going to have to find a way to defend on the base here, Myth. How do you like their base defense? They'll get this Primal Fury, a nice little answer, but I don't think they can come out and defend that tier 2.
I like their base defense insofar as they have a standard mage. The Raijin damage can certainly come through. Ymir, one of the best guardians in the game on base defense. If at any point you can't stand between the auto attacks and the Phoenix, at least able to drop a wall for the next 7 seconds,
right,
able to just at least buy your team a little bit of time. But I feel like I've been harping on him too much, but Layers has been largely absent. I was going to say that 9 turns Blessing is going to be a good tool to at least strip away some beads, but we haven't seen him aggress with it. And Zapman isn't even going to leave it up to the defense. Gets caught out yet again. Nika going to get round 2, second burst, same as the first. Free kill.
Yeah, that was easily done since they knew Zapman had no relics. Both were expended in that last duo lane engagement where 4 dudes rotated over and cleaned him up easily. Darnus sneaking into mid, wanted Baronic. I don't know if Baronic heard it or sensed it, but good instincts from the young man to leap over the wall because he was about to be forced to give up all his relics. The only problem is, though, that 2 people zoned out 4, left side Phoenix, a distant memory. And now the Warriors going to group up for a 5v4 on mid, plus FG, plus a 6k gold lead. Going to be tough for the Scarabs to defend here.
That's the second time the left side Phoenix goes down with not a single Scarab in range to defend it. Now 4 versus 5. They are grouped up. Neilma blinks forward, misses the ultimate, but does zone off Layers. Distracting Neilma is pretty good.
Yeah, you want to try and keep him out of this fight if you can, but SOT left a bit alone. Listen, SOT hasn't had a whole lot to say in this game. His solo laner is barely in his lane. He kept getting involved in the map. And so that is the mid Phoenix down. I was going to say I hadn't brought his name up much, but I think that's just because there's been literally 0 solo lane action in this game, right? All the action has happened elsewhere.
Yeah, Nika said, all right, look, clearly we're not going to win this wet noodle fight, either one of us, so I'm going to bring it elsewhere. Layers stepping a little too far forward. Layers stepping into the trap. Dardes picks up that kill. Erlang Shen dead for 40 seconds, and the only Warrior still with a minute and a half on Fire Giant can strip away this tier 2 tower pretty easily. And just to show how quick the pace of this game has been, Finch, Neilma's still level 13, and he's taken up a tier 2 tower in its entirety. 2 birds down as well. The only Warriors are running away with it.
Yeah, it looks like, what, maybe around the 16-minute mark from those charges when things really got out of control and started to careen up in the Oni Warriors' favor. It was that sequence, man. It was the tier 2 tower push. They turned into a Phoenix push. That turned into the Scarabs trying to sneak away the Fire Giant, and that did not work. They lost a bunch of kills on the back of that engagement, too. I think it'll be worth going back and taking some looks at that stuff. Maybe the desk can break it down for us a bit, but that was where things really, really went wrong for the Scarabs. And the Warriors, as strong as this team is, have done a good job of not giving up anything on the back of that, have they? It's been pretty clean since then.
It really has been. Has there been any kills since then? 18 and 7 across the top there. We're approaching a 10,000 gold deficit as well, and we're still looking at 40 seconds left with this buff, so the Solar Scarabs going to be playing very safe for the near future. Luckily, they have already pushed up that left side wave towards the center, so it's going to be a little bit until those fire minions start to work their way into their base. Now, also working on the center of the map, pretty good. The Scarabs able to maintain their Titan room for now, but I don't think there's a world, a snowball's chance in in Tartarus, if you would, of them stepping up to the Fire Giant. I don't know what I'm allowed to say here, man. My boss is in the Discord. I don't want to get yelled at.
No shot. A snowball's chance in hell. I'll take the credit there for it happily.
Oh my God, are you gonna get fined?
Oh, don't you worry. No shot. Finch immune to fines. Okay, Hidden, I didn't say that. Please don't find me just to prove you can. For the love of God, I will not test the Brinksman here. As the left side Phoenix appears to be the call. I mean, it's not even up, but the Oni Warriors rotating over here all the same. I'd have thought they'd be pushing in right, but it looks like maybe looking to collect some kills so they can find anyone out here alone. Is that the call here, Myth? Out looking for guys on their own, or they're trying to push up all 3 waves? Looks like that is the actual idea with Cubo Fred over here.
I feel like they could send the Oni Warriors, that is, Nika anywhere they want. Send Nika over there to solo siege the right-hand side. He might be able to distract 3 people on the solo Scarabs all on his own. That's the threat level this Tsukiyomi is bringing. Look, the Scarabs are doing a good job of not getting baited into the pace of the Warriors here. They haven't stepped too far forward. They're just farming the waves as they come into their own base, and that's created the time for these Phoenixes to start their respawn. Left side should be coming up very soon. Center not far behind it either. But Fire Giant doing the exact same thing as the Birds, and Oni Warriors already establishing their positioning there. I think they know it. The viewers at home know it. We know it. There's no way the Scarabs step up for this defense.
No, but I like this. It looks like they're kind of hedging their bet. The Warriors are all 100% on fire, and they can push up left. But it looks like that's not even the case. It's 3 men on fire, then Dardez and Cubo Fred in left. But Dardez and Cubo got to be careful. If they get caught out here in left, it looks like that won't be the case. They both had Magai's cloaks anyway. At worst, they lose those, I think, and hightail it out of there. So the Fire Giant on all 5 members. Left side and mid Phoenix will have respawned, yes. But the Warriors with this reset should be able to push up mid and left and start up those sieges. The Scarabs are going to have to find, I think, a real miracle play out of Baronic in particular. If they're going to want to turn this around, they're going to need his big AoE damage to really hit home.
They're going to need some damage coming through from him. He's only got 300 more than his support at this point. Hasn't really had the opportunity to look to get aggressive on this Raijin.
Yeah.
The entirety of the Solar Scarabs making up the bottom 5 on the side of the damage charts. Oni Warriors, on the other hand, doing incredibly well, led by the charge of Nika. 14,000 damage. Over double the near closest opposition. It's a tough situation, but I think that this, again, is going to be a good opportunity for the Scarabs. As time keeps ticking onward, the Warriors can only hit 6 items so many times. I think the game does simplify on defense as well. All you need is some good CC to set up for Baronic. And if Layers has to blink forward and get a 9 turns blessing and sacrifice his life for a 0.5 second taunt so Baronic can get a kill, I think that's value.
I mean, at this point, they'll take whatever they can get. I'm with you there, Myth. Even it's going to have to come at a heavy price if they're going to find a way to beat this Oni Warriors siege here and defend their base. So it's a 3-2 split for now. Cubo, Fred, and Nika in mid, and Neomar, Vote, and Dardez in left. And still playing it patiently here are the Warriors. I think they really want to buy time for Nika and Cubo to move up, because who can step to those 2 together at this point in the game? But no, they are not playing it slow. The left side Phoenix exposed, Veronica inbound pulled off, and it is done. Mid Phoenix will likely be right behind as the Scarabs still have not pulled their trigger on a defense here just yet. And the mid Phoenix is done. And in come the Warriors. Not a heavy commit though. Neomar look for a stun. Maybe Myth, they're waiting to fight on a healthy Phoenix over in right.
A healthy Phoenix or potentially the Titan room, and that's a tough situation. That is, what, the 5th Phoenix to fall this game with just about 0 opposition. Scarabs maintain every single relic and ultimate, but not the base. Left and center Phoenix down, but now we're starting to see the grouping. 5 stack on the right-hand side. Scarabs got to dig their heels in deep here and hope for a miracle.
See if they can find it. They got to find a way to engage on their own terms here as the wall does stop the pressure onto the Phoenix for now. Relics all available here for both teams. Ultimates all available here for both teams. So still plenty of ways for the Scarabs to find a way to get back into this game. They're going to need a win here. They're going to win in a couple more fights after that, but it must begin here in overcoming this 14k gold deficit.
They're just waiting for these fire minion waves to work their way through the map. The Oni Warriors have so much time to work with. Still an entire minute left on this Fire Giant buff. Inbound, throws up the wall to stop the damage coming through onto the Phoenix. Neomar tanking it up. Drops down to about half HP.
Oh, that was all it needed. Once the wall went down, the Warriors just committed. They didn't even over-engage, or really engage at all. They were just able to step in and shred it down to the base now entirely exposed for the Scarabs. Minions starting to pour in, regular ones over in right. There's fire minions in mid and in left as the Warriors seem ready to put this game to bed if they can, if the Scarabs cannot find some kind of way to defend. But there's so many Magi's Cloaks, so many options available as Neomos, the first one in, and layers it. The early target layers is deleted. Half HP removed in an instant. An inbound not far behind as Vote gets himself a double. Cubo Fred getting involved as Vote finds a triple kill, and this game's done. SOT can't defend alone, and the Warriors gonna find all their kills before they end this game. They want to assert complete dominance and let Minions in this one.
No way they all chase. All right, Nika, who's been doing it all for his team up until this point, is at least going to save the dignity of SOT. Does kill the Titan. Nika, ever a good sport here. Only Warriors, man, seems they found their footing a little bit. Sure, we can say that's their first win so far. We need to see a little bit more from them, but if they keep playing like that, I think we will.
A really strong game that I think does come down to that critical moment of that tier 2 and Phoenix push, trade for a Fire Giant push that does not work.
Nuts.
That's probably the kind of the key moment here, but the Warriors navigated it well. That is a hard moment to kind of make that calculus, and they did a great job of it. Congrats to the Warriors. They get their first win. Scarabs still searching for a second. We'll take a quick break, though, then come back to talk about all that craziness that just happened.
And just like that, the Oni Warriors grab their first set win here in the SPL in Season 8. Gormizer, it looked convincing, and that might be an understatement here after game number 2. Signs of life from the Scarabs in game 1, dashed out here in game number 2. This is difficult, right? Lots to focus on with this Warriors team. This is the type of play that we knew that they were capable of. It just took a little bit to get there.
The early game control really coming down, I think, out of the Tsukiyomi rotations. Like, Nika played that perfectly. Good warm-up from game 1 into great play here in game number 2 for him, right? I mean, it was just clean. And the Scarabs had a lot to fight back, at least early on. There was a lot of bounce back. I wanted to give Layers a big compliment because I think he looked good in the first 15 minutes on this Erlong Shin. it was really after that point that things started to fall apart, but the problem was trying to keep up with this, right? Nika, if he's going to rotate in at 7 minutes and get a triple kill, that's about all she wrote. Normally, this sounds like a weird timeline. 14 minutes in here, I loved this play from Dardes. This is just after the giant FG knockup that happened up against the Scarabs. Stopped them from getting the FG, and he picks up, I think, 3 kills at the end of that one. 2 in lane, and then 1 under tower just thereafter. Between Nika and Dardes, this was very difficult to win for the Scarabs just on that alone. It did not help that Neil was playing a good Bacchus game, that Cuvo and then Vote, when they start joining the fight, start popping off. Here was, I think, Vote's triple kill at the very end, where he really could have potentially pushed it even further because of the way his team was just slaughtering everybody that stood in their way.
There you go, Nika.
The Warriors, look, if we were talking about them as a team that really needed to turn things around for what was happening, that was the way to turn it around. That was a statement.
Yeah, the bus has been flipped around 180 degrees going back the opposite direction, which is the correct direction. Beautiful KDAs across the board for the Oni Warriors in this one. I appreciate the shout-outs there towards Neil Gore, kind of doubly so, because the Bacchus was 0-3 up to this point, now 1-4, so anything but consistent, I think, is the Bacchus still. But I appreciate seeing that pick for Neil and the engage that it brought. A few of those highlights, you just see the Bacchus belly flop in, you get some big knockups there towards the end, and the rest of the team there to clean it up. So, love the play from the Warriors here. Scarabs, it's time to turn it around in their next matchup, but you'll see now the Oni Warriors up on top of the Solar Scarabs, technically tied for that 6th place spot down there. Tartarus Titans still searching for a win. They have a chance to do so in our next matchup with the team who's still searching for a loss, or hoping not to find a loss, I guess, in the Jade Dragon. So Gore, up top now we have these 2 teams who've been shot out of a cannon, Leviathans and Dragons. We'll get to see the Dragons in our next matchup. We'll get to see the Leviathans in our last matchup of the week.
Yep.
Gonna be difficult to stop these 2.
The Kings of the wild card there for the Leviathans, too. The last week gave the Dragons a lot of trouble, but with both of those teams right now fighting for first, it feels, again, it depends on what Titans we get to see. We just saw what the Warriors are capable of, so maybe they can change it up and give the Dragons some trouble here. But it seems like their matchup, at least on the Dragon side, might be a little bit easier than what the Leviathans are going to have to deal with tomorrow. So standings-wise, I mean, it feels incredibly close. Everybody's back and forth. Yep. And now with that win, like, not just climbing up a little bit, but depending on the Valkyries set tomorrow, like, somebody else is going to be 1 and 2. So the Warriors, even though it was like a rough start, it definitely does still feel like just the beginning.
That's right, and speaking of the Dragon score, we've started to see some of these Twitter posts coming across. A lot of people starting to get their merchandise from Insight Apparel Company. This is...
Ooh, that looks good.
A beautiful-looking jersey, by the way. Another dub for the boys this afternoon. That's what this guy wants here on Twitter. I'm not going to try to pronounce your name, but at SCH1SM123. Appreciate your tweet. Yeah, Schism. Yeah, but isn't that Stu? Isn't that Stu's at our fearless leader? Is something like that? Schism, I think. I don't know, but Schism123, Gormizer did it for you. Appreciate the tweet. Tweet at us, at SMITE Pro, and might be able to show one of your tweets on live here. Thanks again to Insight Apparel Company for partnering with us here. That's it for the set number 1 of the day, and it's the Oni Warriors who grab their first win of the year. And that means it's time for the Oni Warriors' first post-game interview of the year. John Finch standing by.
Thanks, Dolson. I got Neil Ma here. And Neil, I think there's a ton to talk about after that set, but I think I'd be doing everyone a disservice if we don't go to kind of the craziness of that Game 2 first. Congrats on the win, but talk to me a little bit about the decision-making of pushing over there and left, the craziness of them on the Fire Giant. Talk to me a bit about that Game 2.
I think Game 2, maybe a bit of frustration or a bit of just inexperience on their end at the end of the day, right? I think that they're obviously a really talented team, but I think sometimes they just don't quite make the right decisions. Like, you can tell that your ADC, they're trying to pull a fire. They realize they can't do it. Even like other fights in mid, like I'm running around in mid lane, we're getting Gold Fury, we're getting left tier 2, we're getting Phoenix, right? So I think just a little bit of inexperience, and I think with time, that decision-making will sort itself out, and they won't really be just giving games away. I think they'll eventually just be able to hang in games and just make teams work for it a bit harder, you know? But props to them, they're still making a lot of headway, so I'm excited to see where that team ends up.
Well, Neil, you got to talk to me a little bit about Nika, because he played out of his mind there in game number 2. Maybe some of it, I think you're right about game 2 not being the best we've seen from the Scarabs, but some of it being that he was able to really time those rotations. What's Nika meant for your squad, not just in that game, but just kind of big picture?
He's just been amazing on all fronts, right? Like as a player, if you think of Nika, really strong lane, one of the best team fighting solos in the game, if not the best. His rotations are on point. It's just really good to get our team off to a nice start. Like once we get a nice stranglehold of the game, everything starts to flow. You can see like we're in a position where we have a bit of a lead even as opposed to yesterday, and we look completely different, right? So his rotations and what he's done for our team in the last couple of days has been really noticeable, and I'm sure he'll continue in the future to be even better.
Well, Neil, this is my last question. Game 1, which I think was a bit more competitive, you guys look really, really clean in that one. Is there some adjustment you guys have made kind of behind the scenes to finally look the way that you're looking, or was it just going to take a little bit of time for you guys to really start clicking?
I think it's definitely a bit of both. Like, most definitely is going to take a bit of time. I didn't expect it to be such a big adjustment, to be honest, but I had played on the same team for more or less 3 years, so like I haven't played on a new team in a while, and it is going to take still a lot more time for us to all get on the same page, find our identity and flow from there. But also, after yesterday, we took a look at how we were playing the game, what felt bad, how our drafts were, and we changed a lot up overnight. Definitely, I think that yesterday we didn't play as well as we could have, but also the Valkyries definitely gave us a run for our money and played really, really solid, right? They made good decisions. They didn't make the game easy for us, so props to them. But it definitely opened our eyes to a lot of the things we need to fix, and we made some adjustments today, and I think it showed.
Well, Neil, congrats on getting that first dub. I think that's going to help you guys a lot going forward. Always great to hear some of your insight, man. We have another great game coming up next, though. It's Titans versus Dragons set, going to be right after this break.